Mizan, Ibu Sari Mutia, Bapak Wakil Rektor Bidang Akademik, Bapak Tri Basuki, Bapak Rektor Bidang Kemahasiswaan dan Alumni, Romo Harimanto, dan tuan rumah hari ini, Dekan dari Fakultas Filsafat, Romo Dr. Teologi Leonardus Samosir, OSC. Hari ini kita mendapat kehormatan karena sudah bersama dengan international bestseller author that will stay with you for the rest of your life. Oke, bukunya The Geography of Faith digunakan di Fakultas Filsafat. Itulah salah satu motivasi utama kita mengundang dan menerima beliau di kampus kita ini. Dan ini merupakan suatu kehormatan besar buat Unpar yang sudah cukup lama bekerja sama dengan Mizan. Kemudian selain itu salah satu yang memotivasi kita adalah Unpar adalah kampus keberagaman. Dan oleh sebab itu topik kali ini sangat cocok dengan Unpar. Sebelum kita mulai, sebagai ucapan selamat datang, welcoming speech from Romo Leo. Silakan Romo.
Professor Tri Basuki Yono, PhD, Vice Rector in Academic Affairs, Father Harimanto Suryanugraha, Vice Rector in Students Affairs, Deans of the Faculties, Universitas Akademik of the Katolik Universitas Parahyangan, Mrs. Sari Mutia, the CEO of Mizan Publishing House, all audiences, welcome to this public lecture. I have read but only the prologue of the book, The Geography of the Faith. But I get the impression that the books written by Eric Weiner are very, very attractive, humorous, and brilliant. I think the author must be not only a tourist who seeks pleasure and refresh out of daily pressure and routine. His sharp and critical mention and views, his humor in his sentence, like his own journey of life. I have also the impression that this book, like his answer to his own deep questions. We hope you can take time to listen to this lecture on the geography of faith. And we thank you, Mr. Eric Weiner, for your sharing. We thank you also, Mizan Publishing House, which invited Mr. Eric Weiner to Indonesia for this public lecture. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't know whether to call him Mr. Dean or Mr. or Father or Romo, but thank you very much. So let's switch to the more casual. So that was the formal me, and this is the casual me. So let me introduce you first. Eric Weiner is a journalist with a number of awards, a best-selling writer, and a public speaker, and of course a traveler. And as a journalist for the National Public Radio and a reporter for the New York Times, he has traveled the world, and his trips have inspired his writings and his books. Now, in the Geography of Bliss, you can see the first book, he traveled to seek for the happiest country in the world. I hope we are one of them. Okay. And in the Geography of Genius, he tried to find out how geniuses are born. And in Man Seeks God, That's the alias for the geography of faith, which we are actually celebrating today. He told the story of a man's journey in finding God. Why not woman? Okay. And in the Socrates Express, he took the trail of the philosopher's wisdoms and how they can still be relevant in the modern world. So we are quite privileged because this man here is known as smart, humorous, and engaging. Yes, we'll see. Okay. His books have been translated into 20 languages, including Indonesian. Thank you, Ibu, for translating the excellent writing for us to enjoy. And Eric called himself as a philosophical traveler. Maybe he can explain it to us later, who is interested and even obsessed. I got this text from them, so excuse the with the intersections between human and ideas, where he believes the amazing humanities will surface in the search for happiness, wisdom, and creativity. So you got the father as an opening speech, and you have this homework of making us happy after this session. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Eric Weiner. I'll join you afterward.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Terima kasih to Parahyangan University and to Mizan for inviting me. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. So selamat pagi, senang jumpa Anda. Sampurasun. All right. I discovered that you can learn a little Bahasa, but there are 200 other languages you need to learn in Indonesia to talk to people. So every book has its own creation story, how it came into the world. Just like every culture, every country, every person has their own creation story, so too does every book. And I want to this morning tell you a little bit about how my book, variously called Man Seeks God or The Geography of Faith, same idea, what its creation story is. And in order to do that, I have to tell you a little bit about its parent book, which was my first book, The Geography of Bliss. So, as was mentioned, I was a journalist, an international correspondent, and I was based in New Delhi, in Jerusalem, in Tokyo, and my job was essentially to cover unhappiness, to report on it, because that's what journalists do. Journalists, for the most part, do not write about happy places and happy people, but we cover war, disease, conflict, and it is important work, and I enjoyed it on one level, but I woke up one day and I thought, well, what am I doing? I'm already kind of an unhappy person on some level, and here I am just reporting on unhappy people and places. So I had an idea, what if I traveled the world looking for the happiest people in the happiest places? And then I thought, well, what if I got my news network to pay for me to travel the world looking for happy people in happy places? And they said, no, that's not what we do. So I decided to write a book, which became known as The Geography of Bliss. I hope you read it, but here are two little spoilers or takeaways that relate to my second book. And that is, one, is that religious people who attend mosque or church or wherever on a regular basis, tend to be happier than non-religious people. In surveys, they report being happier. That's how we measure happiness. We ask you overall on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you? So that's a mystery. Is it because of their belief in God or some supreme being? Or is it because they belong to a church group or an Islamic society? And we know that we get a lot of happiness from other people, from social connections. Maybe that's it. It's a mystery that I wanted to solve. And the other thing that I conclude at the end of the geography of bliss is that happiness is not enough. Happiness as we define it today as kind of a pleasurable experience when you have a good nasi goreng or you hang with friends, that kind of pleasurable happiness is not enough. We want a life filled with meaning. And what can supply meaning in our life? Religion, God, spirituality, whatever you want to call it, is certainly one source. It has been for thousands of years. So that's the mom and dad of Man Seeks God is Geography of Bliss. I finished the book, very stressful finishing a book, and the next day, after turning in the manuscript to my publisher, I got this pain in my belly, my abdomen, a sharp pain, and I thought, well, it's just stress, that'll go away. 2 days later, the pain was worse and then worse still. And my wife said, you should go to the hospital. Now, I don't like hospitals. Nobody likes hospitals, but my father was a doctor, a cancer doctor, and he used to take me when I was 8 years old with him to see the patients at the hospital. And when you're a cancer doctor, unfortunately, sadly, a fair number of your patients die. They don't survive. And so I, as an 8-year-old, connected hospitals with death. In my mind, people died because of hospitals. And so if I could just stay out of the hospital, I would never die. Was sort of the logic that I maintained on some level into adulthood. I know it makes no sense, but I don't like hospitals. But the pain was so bad, I listened to my wife and I went. And they did a bunch of tests, as they do. And they did something called a CAT, or a CT scan, of my abdomen. And then a woman doctor comes in to see me and says, well, she used a slang word in English. She said, there's something funky on your CT scan. And I didn't like this combination of words, funky and CT scan. It struck me as problematic. She said, but you just relax, we're going to do some more tests and we'll check on you later. So of course I can't relax. I'm lying in this room. I'm wearing like a paper towel. They call it a robe, but it's just a paper towel they give you. And it's cold and I'm scared. I'm very scared. And a nurse walks in. Very nice woman. And she sees I'm nervous. And she leans down and whispers in my ear a question, 6 words that would change my life in many ways. And those 6 words were, have you found your God yet? Have you found your God yet? And my first instinct is to panic, that maybe she's seen my funky CT scan and she knows I'm going to meet my maker and that's why she's asking me. But it was said out of kindness. She was in a way kinder than the doctor because she sensed my fear and she was reacting to me as a person, not as a patient. Have you found your God yet? She didn't say, have you found God yet, but she made it personal. Have you found your God? And long story short is after many tests, it was nothing serious, thank God. But which God? Which is what I'll get to. I'm released from the hospital, and I'm physically okay, but that question kept repeating in my mind. Have you found your God yet? And it was not a question I had thought too much about before. But I was of a certain age, a certain point in my life, and had this brush with illness, and so the question is just stuck in my head. Well, what would my God look like if I did find him or her or they? I was born into the Jewish religion, but I was not particularly observant. My family were what I call gastronomical Jews. We ate Jewish food and bagels and lox and things, and this made us Jewish. We didn't really think about God too much. And as an international correspondent for the radio network, To be honest, I had covered religious conflicts. Arabs and Jews in the Middle East, Hindus and Muslims in South Asia, and my exposure to religion was that it was a source of conflict. But something told me that I was missing something. And I knew that we live in an age of choice. Certainly in America, that's the case. I don't know about Indonesia, but you know what the biggest single, when they do surveys and ask people what your religious affiliation is, the biggest single group that's growing the fastest are what they call nuns. Not N-U-N-S, like the convents, but N-O-N-E-S, as in none of the above. That's the single biggest group. People who say they have no religious affiliation. But this is interesting, they don't say they are atheists. They're not atheists, they have no religious affiliation. They are freelance, free agents. And so increasingly, religion in this day and age has become a matter of choice. You don't necessarily have to stick to the faith that you're born into. So then I decided to conduct this experiment that became the book. What if? Every great experiment begins with those two words, what if? What if I were to go out and find my God? Come back to that nurse and say, yes, I found my God, here he or she is. How would that search look? Well, the first thing I need to do was to narrow down the search. I didn't realize how difficult that would be. Do you know how many religions there are in the world currently? I knew there were probably dozens, maybe hundreds. I researched and found out there are 10,000. 10,000 religions, with new ones being formed every year, every month. Obviously, they're not all big, but there are 10,000. And I had to narrow it down, and I went through the list. Some were too narrow. Hungarian folk religion. I'm not Hungarian, I'm not folksy, so eliminate that. Some were too broad. There are Unitarian Universalists. And it seems to me that believing in everything seems a lot like believing in nothing, which is what I was trying to get away from. So in the end, I chose 8 religions. 8 religions, and I wanted a buffet. I've been eating a lot of buffets in hotels, and this was a buffet choice of religions. And in a buffet, you want some variety. So I had some monotheistic religions, like Islam and Christianity. I had, polytheistic religions as well, and also religions that don't necessarily believe in a God, such as Buddhism or Jainism. I had some that are mainstream, the Franciscans. I spent time with them in New York. The Sufis, which I'll talk about in a minute. And I had some strange religions, but who's to say what's strange? Wiccans and people who believed in UFOs as a higher power. Because my philosophy, when confronted with something strange, like people who love UFOs or Dorian, when confronted with these, that was a joke, because Dorian is acquired taste, is to acknowledge the strangeness, but then to always ask, what do they get out of it? Because different cultures always get something out of their so-called strange beliefs. And it's strange to me, it's not strange to them. So my job as a philosophical traveler, I see it, is to keep both ideas in my head at the same time. One idea, this is strange, UFOs, Dorian, and also they get something out of it. The UFO religion gives them meaning. The fruit gives them sustenance, whatever it is, whatever it is. And so that is my open-mindedness. I decided to give myself a name. I'm not an atheist, because atheists say there is no God, and that seems awfully definite. I'm not sure about anything at all, really. How can I be sure of that? Agnostics are uncertain, but they're really atheists without conviction. So I decided to call myself a confusionist. I'm confused. I don't even know what I don't know. But I know something, and that is that it's not enough to study these religions. And I know many of you are studying religion or studying philosophy, and there's a big difference between studying a religion and trying it and practicing it. Experience is the best teacher. And I really feel that these days we have diminished personal experience. We live in a world of expertise, of information overload, and your own personal experience, your subjective truth. And there is something known as subjective truth. You may know that love is an important emotion, and you can study its effects on the brain and release of endorphins. But that's different from knowing that you love your daughter or your son or your parents. That's knowing on the subjective level. And it's that kind of knowledge that I sought in my search for my God. Now, I should also say that I inserted humor into my book. I can't help it. And you may think, well, is that sacrilegious to have religion and humor? Lots of religions welcome humor. The Christian thinker and writer G.K. Chesterton said that the test of a good religion is whether you can make fun of it. The test of a good religion is whether you can make fun of it. And I would say actually to make fun of yourself more than to make fun of the religion. So I poke fun at myself. I take my search seriously, but I don't take myself seriously. And I look for people who can give me entrance, a pathway to these religions. And I decided, even though I could study all of them without leaving my home in Washington, D.C., I decided to go to the source, to go to Turkey for Sufism, to go to Israel for Kabbalah, to go to Kathmandu for Tibetan Buddhism, because it's like food. When food moves from one culture to another, it gets watered down. It's not as authentic. You take spicy Indonesian food and you bring it to the US and it's bland because they think Americans can't handle Indonesian spices, which is true, by the way, we cannot. And it's watered down. And I'm a traveler, a philosophical traveler, so I'm going to go to the source. Besides, I'm a firm believer in the power of travel, that, as the writer Henry Miller said, one's destination is never a place, but a new way of looking at things. One's destination is never a place, but a new way of looking at things. And I wanted to look at this whole question of religion and spirituality and finding my God in a new way. And so I needed to travel. And I hope you read the book. If you haven't, you'll go on a journey around the world without leaving Bandung. But I'll tell you just one or two stories from the book. And then I think we're going to have a conversation up here. And we're going to welcome your questions. I was going to write about Islam, but which part of Islam? Wahhabi Islam, Shia, Sunni? I decided to go with the Sufis, the mystical arm of Islam. I had seen the whirling dervishes who were Sufis. I had read some poetry of Rumi, who was a Sufi, also known as Mevlana. And Turkey, I thought, was the place to go for the Sufis, even though they're in many parts of the world. And I witnessed what's known as the Sema, which is the dance, but dance doesn't quite do it justice, of the whirling dervishes. And I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it is beautiful to behold. They are moving very fast and twirling, yet they are also contemplative at the same time. It is stillness in motion. And I saw that, and I wanted not just to watch it, not just to study it, but to experience it firsthand. And so I tried to find a teacher. I went to Konya, which is the sort of heart of Sufism in Turkey. It's where Rumi died and where there's a big mausoleum to him. Couldn't find a teacher there. Finally, in Istanbul, I found a teacher, a woman named Dedin, who was willing to take me on. And she was a very tough teacher. She was like a gymnastics coach in the Olympics, you know, these big, tough women. And I put on the special shoes that you wear, and the idea is as you twirl that you have one hand here in this world pointing down and one hand up toward the other world, and you twirl. Except I couldn't really do it right. And she kept just standing there and going, tisk, 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 you're not doing it right. She said, in order to do it, I need to twirl from the inside. And I didn't know exactly what that meant. And then she said something even more concerning to me. She said, in order to be a dervish, I need to rid myself of all negative thoughts. Now, I'm very big on negative thinking. It's sort of like breathing for me. I do it several times a minute. I'm joking, but I'm serious. I always try to escape my negative thinking, but she said I had to rid myself of all negative thinking. I try to do that. I try to twirl. And I remember what Rumi said, which is, fall, fall again, but try, try again. Doesn't matter how many times you fall, as long as you come again. So I keep trying and trying. And for a moment, I got it. One hand down, one hand up, I'm spinning, and I say to dead end, I'm doing it, I'm whirling. And then I fell. Because I had observed the moment, and I had done what Rumi said you should never do. He said, never analyze enthusiasm, because it will kill it. The British philosopher John Stuart Mill said, the moment you realize your happiness, the moment you realize you're happy, you stop being happy. It's that realization that, oh, I'm happy, or oh, I'm whirling like a dervish, and you lose what is known in psychology as a sense of flow. When you're lost in the moment and there's no whirling dervish, there's only whirling. And there's no dancing, there's no dancer, there's only dancing. And it's a very fragile state, and when you step out of it, you fall. So in each chapter, in each story, in each place I went, I pulled together lessons. Lessons about the religious life. And I'll just share a couple of them right now, and then we'll move to our conversation and your questions. One is, a big question is, does it matter if a religion is true? And are some religions more true than others? I don't know, and frankly, I don't care. I subscribe to what the great student and scholar of religion, William James, American psychologist, lived 100 years ago. And he wrote a whole book about the varieties of religious experience, and it was called The Varieties of Religious Experience. And he said something really confounding and amazing. He said, truth is what works. Truth is what works. Now, does that mean that you can say, well, 2 + 2 = 5, that's my truth? No, that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about the kind of subjective truth that I mentioned earlier. Not knowing the chemistry of love, but just knowing that you love your daughter more than anything in the world. And you know it without having to study it, without anyone having to tell you it. Consider exercise. You can study how exercising on a regular basis, the biochemistry of how it makes you lose weight and get in shape and all this, or you can just exercise. You don't need to know why, you just need to do it. Truth is what works. So that's one of my conclusions. The other is that all religions have a couple of things in common, and one of them really is humility. You find it across all faiths, certainly in Christianity, certainly in Islam, which means submission, of course. The idea that it's not just about you. This life is about more than just you. I was in Bhutan, a Himalayan kingdom, where they have a policy of gross national happiness. Buddhist country, about 40, 50 years ago, the king was asked about the country's rather pathetic gross national product. Your Highness, your country has such a low gross national product. What are you going to do about it? And he replied, I don't know, but we care more in Bhutan about gross national happiness. And so that's why I was in Bhutan, and I was sitting down with a man named Karma. And I said, Karma, you know, my personal happiness is not where it should be. I need to work on it. And he said, what is this in you and you Americans and personal happiness? Happiness is not personal. It is 100% relational. It's about the quality of your relationships with friends and family, but also with strangers and neighbors and people halfway around the world. It's your relationship with nature, with the universe. It's a different orientation. And so it is, I think, with quote-unquote good religion. It is not just about you. It is never just about you. It is you in relationship with someone else. The word religion comes from the Latin religio, which means to bind, to connect. What are you binding with? Not just yourself. That would be silly. You're binding with others, and with nature, and with the planet, and with the galaxy. It's a connection. Religion is not, good religion is not a noun or an adjective, it's a verb. It's a connector. And I don't know if this is going to be a strange question, but in Indonesia, do you have a store called IKEA, furniture store? You have it, okay. The reason I'm asking is because at the end of my search, I decide to come up with what I call an IKEA God, some assembly required. And if you ever try to assemble furniture from IKEA, it's all in Swedish, diagrams, I'm not good at it. I can never get it to work. But the idea is some assembly required. And so it is with religion, I think. They are all syncretic. By that I mean they all have pieces of one another. There is no such thing as a 100% pure religion. Christianity came after Judaism, Islam after Christianity. Meanwhile, Buddhists came after Hindus. They are all borrowing from the previous generation and adding as well. And so it is possible to assemble your own religion from a few pieces, as long as you have a strong base. And the base may be what you were born into, but there needs to be a base. You can't assemble a piece of furniture with 20,000 parts, 10,000 parts, the number of religions, remember, and you cannot do it with 10,000. But you can bring in some aspects of it. So I have an IKEA God to some extent now. I still go to synagogue occasionally. I meditate almost every day, mindful meditation on my breath for a few minutes. I do Hindu yogic breathing exercises, which help me with the incredible stress that I feel on most days. And on my wrist is a bracelet I purchased recently in Jordan on a visit there. And it's written, you can't see it, I can barely see it this close, but it's Arabic. And it says, all my success I owe to Allah, or to God. And I had an Arabic-speaking friend confirm it does not say, dumb American tourist paid too much for a bracelet. She said, no, yes, it says, all your success you owe to God, to Allah. And I wear it not because I'm about to convert to Islam, but because I respect Islam, I see wisdom in it, and because I try to make my life, and I'm being serious now, I've been serious since I got up here, I should add, but I try to make my life about more than just myself. And yes, I'm an international best-selling author. I've got 4 books. They've been translated into 25 languages. I'm an extremely handsome man. But if I'm only for myself, then who am I? What am I? And I realize I'm at my happiest and most fulfilled when I'm getting out of myself. Traveling to different parts of the world, not because I'll see a huge billboard of my face on the street, which is pretty cool, okay, I admit that's cool, but it's not as cool as helping others, giving something back to others, trying to share what you've learned about being more than just for yourself. And ultimately, it was William James who said the whole point of religion is not the afterlife or even God necessarily, but it's about this life. It's about leading, and these are his words, a richer, larger, more satisfying life. A richer, larger, more satisfying life. And to that, I can only say one word, amen. Thank you for listening.
And all of that can be found in the introduction and the first chapter of the book.
I guess so.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got my book to be signed.
Oh, yes, of course.
On that note, do you want to drink something?
I think I will. Go ahead.
Sambil menunggu Eric minum, ada pesan sponsor teman-teman. Eric akan meluangkan waktu untuk tanda tangan di bukunya hari ini. Sudah ada mejanya di situ. You'll do the signing later.
Yes, I'd be happy to.
And buku-bukunya untuk hari ini khusus diskon 15%. That's the magic word. Dan ada di luar, di dekat di stand Mizan, dekat meja registrasi. Jadi kalau teman-teman setelah acara ini berminat, silahkan. Okay, so shall we?
I hope the questions aren't too difficult.
I was told this is not a meet and greet. This is a lecture.
Okay.
Okay, I don't know what it is about the nurse. I mean, like I have a similar experience with you. A nurse from Kuala Lumpur saved me from a baby blues in Melbourne when I gave birth.
Wow.
And she was not that gentle.
Okay.
She was like, get out of this or you will suffer the rest of your life. And that really helped.
Well, nurses really, as I said, connect to patients and on an emotional level that most doctors do not. Doctors kind of see us as machinery that needs to be repaired. And sometimes that's good, that's what they do. But nurses tend to treat the whole patient and to recognize someone in a time of crisis, not just medical crisis, but spiritual crisis. And let's face it, being very sick as you were, and I thought I was, that's the kind of crisis. That's when people tend to go on begin these spiritual searches, is there some sort of crisis. And it could be health, could be the loss of a loved one, could be you get fired from your job, but it's some crisis. And it takes these jolts, really, to snap us out of our kind of trance that we're in on a daily basis.
On that note, that brings me to my next question. Some people say that converts are more devoted.
The conviction of the converted, we have an expression.
Or, for example, those who run to religion are those who are, like in the lowest point. Or if we want to be a little bit political, in Indonesia, when you are about to be convicted, and then you become really religious, at least from the
convicted become converted.
Yes, something like that. So, what do you think about that?
I mean, I find converts interesting, and I sought them out, looked for them when researching this book, because they could explain the appeal of this religion. For instance, a man named James Hopkins. He was a businessman, a very successful investment banker in the US. And at age 40, he decided he didn't want any more money. It wasn't going to make him any happier. And he picked up and he moved to Nepal, to Kathmandu, and studied at a Buddhist monastery there. And I met James at a cafe in Kathmandu, and he could really explain like why he would walk away from all this worldly success, all this money, and move halfway around the world to Nepal, to Kathmandu, to study Buddhism. While a Buddhist person in Nepal or Tibet or wherever, if they were born into it, they may not be able to explain it as well, and they may not be as motivated. I mean, as far as reaching low points, you know, it's hard to bounce unless you've hit the floor first. And I think, you know, you see this with people recovering from alcoholism or any crisis, is they have to really hit bottom and then to start going up. You know, and I think there's benefits to having a crisis. At the time, it doesn't seem that way, but you know, if you were convicted of a crime or anything bad happened to you, that's when you might make a big change in your life. And we don't really have the tools for changing our life. I mean, I've written about at least two of the tools, religion and philosophy. I guess you can count a third, psychology. But you know, it used to be in ancient Athens, like if this was a gymnasium, which was a school, you wouldn't only study subjects, you know, with textbooks. It would be about exercise, it would be about religion, it would be universities, such as they were, sort of dealt with the whole person. And we don't have that, so we have to find ways to get out of the bottom.
Yeah. So would you say that being in the lowest point of your life or being in a small crisis can be like a reasoning for that?
Yes, ideally a small crisis. I mean, Nietzsche said, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
I thought it's a song.
No, it's a quote from the philosopher, but what does kill you kills you. So ideally you want something that doesn't kill you but makes you not only stronger but different, really, ideally it's a small crisis. But we're something about humans, the way we're wired, that it takes a big crisis to get us to change. You know, the alcoholic will say, well, no, I can just, you know, I hit the tree driving home drunk, but I'll be okay. It was just a tree. Hopefully they learn before they hit a person or they get into a serious accident. So.
I have to confess, I got more religious during the pandemic. So
I think people during the pandemic were and still are seeking. Whether it's religion or philosophy, or in the US we have something called the Great Resignation. People are quitting jobs. People don't want to go back to the office. They like having more balance in their life. People, isn't it interesting that people, you know, when people were having such a difficult time, many people economically during the pandemic, they also decided and are deciding now to make big changes to their life and risk, you know, quitting a job without knowing what their next job is. So it's interesting. It was sort of a global crisis that everybody, you know, underwent at the same time. Everyone had the nurse saying, have you found your God yet? Have you found your purpose in life yet? It was happening to 7 billion of us, not just one person.
Okay. Like, we see that the room is almost full. Would you say that every one of us here have this urge of looking for something greater than ourselves?
That's a good question. I would say everyone has the seed of that feeling. They may not be aware of it. The Buddhists would say it may take many lifetimes for them to be aware of it. But I think for some people, the feeling is closer to the surface, and others it's more buried. Maybe if you're 21 years old and you're studying at university and you're thinking about what job will I get when I graduate, will my grades be good enough? Will I get into this graduate school in Australia or the US or Jakarta? And you're thinking about yourself, as I think I was when I was 21. But as you get older, you, I think, start to think about something more than yourself. You realize you're not going to be here forever. So you think, like, what will I leave behind? I'm fortunate in that, I have books that hopefully will outlive me. They better. But there are other ways you can leave a legacy. Legacy is a big word. Just leave something bigger than yourself. And so I think, yes, I think everyone in the room, whether they're aware of it or not, has that seed of that thought that there's more to life than just myself.
One question before I ask from the audience. People say that the younger generation nowadays, they have this spiritual restlessness. For me personally, I'm a 90s person. Not born in the 90s, but grew up in the 90s. Okay. Somebody smile.
1990s.
1990s.
Okay, it's a joke.
So, what I notice is they are more, they have more courage to like you said, that to say that I don't belong.
Restlessness, you say.
Yeah. I'm not. We in Indonesia we used to have 5 religions that are acknowledged, right? And
now you have 200, right? But there are 5 major ones.
Yeah, and now I've seen younger generations that is really comfortable to say that I'm agnostic. And what do you think of that?
Or they would, this is the Indonesian version of what I was speaking about earlier, the nuns, N-O-N-E-S, none of the above. And it's, I don't think it's, okay, we can get caught up in terminology, atheist, agnostic. Another good word is possibilian.
Possibilian?
It's a made-up word. Possibilian is someone who believes in possibilities.
Okay.
And I would say they're less agnostic than possibilians. Possibilians. It's not a real word, but it's okay. You can make up words. And this restlessness is at the heart of it. And I think this restlessness among young people is a good thing. I mean, I have been restless since I was 5 years old, and I ran away from home and got 3 or 4 kilometers from home before the police picked me up. And I've been restless ever since, and I've traveled the world, I've written these books, I keep writing books, I keep coming to places like Indonesia, because I am restless. And I think that's good. As long as when you find something good, like for me it's meditation, or this saying on the bracelet, that you're restless, but you also can be restful too. Restlessness as in seeking something more genuine in your life and something deeper. Not better as in the better car or the better job, but something that feels right, that feels like it's a good fit for you. So it's a combination of restlessness and what I call radical acceptance at the same time, which sounds like a contradiction, but it's not. There's a line, I believe it's from the Bible somewhere, don't quote me, about letting go of things not meant for you.
Yeah.
And that has been something that I've learned later in life, is the importance of letting go of things not meant for you. So very briefly, I had what I thought was the best job as a foreign correspondent for American radio, traveling the world, millions of people heard me on the radio, and it was almost the perfect job for me, but it wasn't perfect. It wasn't the right fit for me. And in order to have this life where I write these books and I speak to you here, I had to let go of that thing that was not meant for me. And the hardest thing to do is, it's easy to let go of that terrible job. You just hate your boss, you hate it. It's so boring too. It's easy to quit that job, relatively easy. What's hard is when you have a job, for instance, where It's satisfying. You get some ego gratification. The salary is good. Your friends say, oh, you work there, that's great. But inside, you know it's not really right for you, so that you have to let go of it. And that's harder, letting go of things that are not meant for you, even if others say, oh, that's great. So it's about turning inward and listening to your inner voice.
Sure.
When we have so many voices outside of us, on social media, where everyone has a perfect life on Instagram and everyone has more followers than you. Although I've picked up 300 followers in Indonesia since I came here.
Will you add more today?
Yeah, I hope so. At Eric Weiner Books on Instagram. But it's not about, it's about ignoring those voices and listening to your inner voice, which is in some ways is easier today because we have more, you know, before if you wanted to study Islam, you'd have to go to a Muslim country. Now, in Washington, D.C., I could go to an Islamic center and study Islam or Christianity. So it's easier, but it's harder because we live in a noisier world than ever before. There's so much noise out there and on our phones. And if you're looking at your phone right now, you are getting noise and you should put it down. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, let's hear the noise from the audience then. Do we have questions?
Let's hear the music, not the noise. The music.
Okay, we have one from the front row.
Okay.
May you introduce yourself, sir, before you...
I think they're
pose
going
the
to bring him a microphone. Maybe.
Yes. Pak
It's coming quickly.
Slamet.
Thank you. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Yohanes Slamet Purwadi. In Bahasa, Yohanes means Johns in English. You can call me John, okay?
Okay, go.
I am half American.
I love dogs, by the way. I have a dog.
Yeah, in my mindset, Mr. Eric, I am half American because I graduated from Notre Dame University and then also doing sandwich program in Georgetown University, Washington, D.C. also. So I have a fundamental question. You just mentioned that religion can supply meaning. So can philosophy also supply meaning? I'm an academician. So I teach philosophy. I'm an amateur philosopher, you know. So can philosophy supply meaning? Because I'm an academician, so I get meaning from the book of philosophy, many books of philosophy. But you are a traveler. So interesting when you said that like destination is not a place, but way of seeing, way of interpreting. It's very interesting for me. I will tell my student your question just now, you know. So it's very interesting. So as a traveler, how you can explain how philosophy can supply meaning more deeperly. And then the second question, you also mentioned in brochure written by Mizan, you know, I read it. Creativity, local culture, you mentioned about local culture also. Local culture can be a source of meaning, source of creativity, I think, creativity. But we need to realize that our huge competitor, our big enemy is global capitalism that has tendencies to homogenize local culture. I think this is our big question in the world, part of the world.
Right.
So global capitalism try to homogenize every aspect of life. So what is your comment about that? You know, this is our challenge.
The last one's about
Thank
globalization. Local. Okay, let me answer the second question first. Yeah, look, it's a problem. I landed in Jakarta, and immediately what I saw was a Starbucks and a McDonald's. And so I think, wow, I've traveled thousands of miles, and and I'm seeing same things as home: Starbucks, McDonald's. You have Dunkin' Donuts here in Bandung. You have Subway, Pizza Hut. You have Pizza Hut? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but that's just the surface. I think globalization. This is a longer conversation, but briefly, I think globalization is actually very thin, and you scratch the surface of an Indonesian who's having coffee at Starbucks or pizza at Pizza Hut. You know, you find out they're having nasi goreng pizza, and they're having, besides that is very superficial, and that their Indonesian culture, more specifically say their Javanese culture here, and their West Javanese culture here, is going to be deeper. And globalization can bring cultures to others around the world. That's a positive thing. The danger, as you suggest, is that it dilutes the cultures. And I think we need to protect cultures the way we protect endangered species. Because the endangered species, whether it's the pandas in China or whatever, or the Komodo dragon, they provide a richness to life, and they make the planet healthier, and they make us healthier. And I think the same thing is true of culture. You have how many languages in Indonesia? 200? Something.
Yeah, 2 or 3.
And people say, well, why do they need so many languages? Well, because each language is an expression of a culture,
Yes.
and that's why it matters. As far as your first question, I mean, I wrote a whole book about how philosophy can provide meaning in life. The Socrates Express, in search of life lessons from dead philosophers. I mean, again, 2,000 years ago, the ancient Greeks saw philosophy for what it was. The word philosophia from the ancient Greek means lover of wisdom. A philosopher is someone who loves wisdom. And only later did we sort of separate, you know, wisdom and religion, philosophy and religion, but really they're one and the same. They're a system of thought, a way of being in the world that can provide you with meaning. And I don't make a huge distinction. Like if you were to study Indian philosophy and you would try to separate that from Indian religion, you'd have a very hard time. They are closely linked. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think ideally philosophy is religion and religion is philosophy, and that philosophy provides like the I guess the software, and religion is more the hardware of what you need to do to have the meaning in your life. I think that analogy holds. But thank you, Dog.
Thank you, Eric. Anyone else? Any other questions from the audience?
I was told this was a curious, inquisitive group of people.
We have somebody in the middle there,
Okay.
the guy with the yellow checkered. To your right, sir. Yes. Thank you.
Is this on? Hello? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So I'm Raven from Industrial Engineering. My question is, Nietzsche mentions how we can create our own values. Do you think he meant that we could rediscover them, and that each new value we create for ourselves, though discovered, has a subjective nuality to ourselves? Or do you think he meant it in a more literal sense where we can make a totally new value to supply meaning for our lives?
No.
Yeah, that's all.
Neither can I.
I don't think we can get you because it sounds mumbling here. Do you mind taking off your mask? Okay.
Should I start from the very beginning? Oh yeah, that's better.
Please.
Okay, so I'm not a big fan of Nietzsche, but I dabble. So Nietzsche mentions how we can create our own values. Do you think he meant that rediscovering a value means it's new subjectively to every individual, or do you think he meant it in a more literal sense, where as an individual we can create a value which has never been discovered before, which can in turn supply meaning to our lives?
Is it Nietzsche?
Nietzsche, yes.
Yeah.
So I write about Nietzsche in the Socrates Express, and I think he's talking, when he died, his life's work was incomplete, where all our life's work will be incomplete. But he was working on a project of revaluing, and I think that's what he was talking about. Not necessarily creating new values, but deciding which values matter the most to you. And I think whether we're aware of it or not, we're always making choices about that reflect our values. An example would be the smartphone in your hand. Now, some people say technology is neutral. I do not believe that. Every technology has a bias, not a political bias, but a bias towards something that the designer and the user value. So when you buy a smartphone, a new one, say, because it's faster and has more hard drive capacity, really what you're valuing are speed, that's a value, connectivity, you always want to be connected, quantity, more information is better than less information, mobility, you want to carry it with you. So by saying I'm going to own the best, fastest smartphone, you are buying into not just the phone, but the set of values that go with it. And I think what Nietzsche was talking about is we should question these values and revalue. Maybe I decide that being connected to my phone all the time is distracting. I'm not able to write as well or think or spend time with my daughter. Maybe I want a phone that will not be connected all the time, that does fewer things. That's just one small example, but I think that or what I was talking about before, you're 21, your value is your career and your own personal success. As you get older, you revalue and value other people more. You're not really, I think, creating something new that never existed before, but it's new for you, and I think that's what Nietzsche was talking about, or how I interpret it.
So we shouldn't be worried that it will become subjective.
Well, we are subjective, I think,
Yeah.
and I do think that, I think we're living in a strange time where we have too much subjectivity and not enough subjectivity. So people who don't know anything about medicine say you should eat this fruit and you'll be cured of COVID. That's bad subjectivity.
Yep.
But then again, you have people who feel something, but they don't, a strong feeling of love or hate or whatever it is, but they feel they can't express it because they're not an expert. So I think we're in a strange place where we have too much subjectivity in some areas, but not enough subjective truth, because we live in a world of expertise.
Yes.
And to be honest, universities can contribute to that problem where maybe a student feels they can't question the professor or say something because they're not an expert yet, or they're an expert in one very narrow discipline,
Yeah.
so they can't talk about another discipline, and I think that's a problem too, over-specialization.
Yeah. Okay, next. Yes.
Anything.
We have one there. It's a good distribution, right?
Geographically, yes.
Yes. Okay.
But no women yet,
Okay.
so.
Well, actually, I just want to know, like, your thought about religion. Like, what is religion for you? Can you define it to us?
Can you state your name and where you're from?
I'm Gifar. I'm Bachelor of Arts.
Okay, thank you. So what is religion for you?
Wow.
Am I correct? Yes.
It's anything, and it can be a philosophy too, that makes me a better person. And not just better for myself, but better for others as well. And I think, I know it's dangerous to talk about good religion and bad religion. And I think, we have to be humble about ultimate truths. But you can look, I believe this is from the Bible also, you shall know them by the fruits of their labor, or by their, something like that. That we know how good something is by the fruit that it produces. That's the value of the papaya tree, is how good is the papaya. And I think it is helpful to say, Well, look at people who come out of not just religion, religion covers, Christianity covers a lot of territory, right? As an example. But I spent time with the Franciscans, who I quite admire, in a very poor neighborhood in New York City, and they were doing very good work, helping the local community. They lived like St. Francis did, very poor, very simply, and I would judge the Franciscans by the fruit, by that. So religion for me is anything that makes me a better person.
Okay. Women and boleh bahasa Indonesia ya. Kalau misalnya lebih nyaman pakai bahasa Indonesia, boleh nanti saya coba bantu terjemahkan. Dari depan mungkin. I was telling them that I can help translate.
You can trick, yeah, I thought so.
Oke, karena Ibu Sylvie mau menerjemahkannya, saya juga pakai bahasa Indonesia saja.
Oh, baik Pak.
Ya, saya senang bahwa Eric Weiner itu rupanya bergaul sangat baik dengan para Fransiskan di New York ya. Dan kebetulan saya juga dididik dalam tradisi Fransiskan.
So he's from Franciscan. He's from Franciscan.
Okay, good.
And also one of the founder of this university is also Franciscan. This university.
Oh, great.
Nah, pertanyaan informatif aja Bu Sylvie. Tadi dalam pengantar Bu Sylvie mengatakan why not woman gitu in the title of that book. Pertanyaan saya informatif saja. Ini kan di Amerika itu sangat kuat, saya kira mulai dari tahun 90-an atau 80-an yang namanya itu inclusive language. Ya, you have to write your article, your books in such a language, inclusive language. Ketika Ibu Sylvie tadi ngomong kok mana perempuannya gitu, where is woman gitu. Nah, saya hanya mau tahu reaksi perempuan terhadap judul buku ini di Amerika. Terima kasih.
What's the reaction of women to your books in the name of inclusivity? I mean, like he said that inclusivity has been the buzzword lately. So when I asked you about the woman earlier, so
well, I mean, first of all, in an earlier edition of Man Seeks God, Mizan called it The Geography of Faith, which I think, in retrospect, maybe have been a better title. I didn't want all my books to have geography, and I wanted to be more than like a one-hit wonder, as we say. But it was supposed to be a play on words. So first of all, as far as the title goes, it's Person Seeks God, but that sounds a bit clunky. So, but it just in general, I certainly think I'm inclusive in Geography of Genius. I write about women geniuses. In Socrates Express, I write about at least 3 women philosophers. You'd probably have to ask my wife and daughter if I'm inclusive. But I see people as people, man or woman, and and I've heard, and some of my most faithful, enthusiastic readers are women, and Indonesian women, apparently.
Indonesian women. Okay. I read the first chapter already, and this Sufi lady, right?
Yes.
That you wrote about that. So
Yes, she was the Sufis welcome women, and she was a woman teacher. So I am hopefully inclusive, but I welcome being challenged on that.
Okay. Yep. We'll continue in the middle. We'll go to the middle here. Thank you, Lionel.
Okay, thank you. Let me introduce myself. My name is James.
Hello.
James.
James, hello.
And I'm student of philosophy in Unpar.
Great.
So, my question is, who is God to you?
Okay. Religion, now God.
Boy. I mean, okay, it's a hard question because I'll be honest here, this is probably the most controversial book I wrote, because you can write about happiness, genius, philosophy. In my circles, my friends tend to be very secular, and they can be kind of patronizing or condescending toward religious people. There is a feeling that they don't know any better, or that they need to use religion or God as a crutch in life, that they're weak somehow. And even if they say, oh, it's okay if they believe in God, but I'm a man of science and reason, so I don't believe in God. And there was a theologian, I forget his name, I think Pascal, who talked about us all having a God-shaped hole in our life, a God-shaped hole. And I think we still have that hole, even though, because really we live in an age of reason and science and technology, that a lot of us, including myself, feel something is missing. And yet we feel that we can't, if we're people of science and reason, we can't talk about God and be taken seriously. So this image of God as a big man in the sky with a beard, it's always a man, right? And with a beard is I think not helpful. I prefer to think of God as an extension of yourself that is bigger than yourself. It's what keeps you breathing. I'm breathing without trying, without thinking about it. My heart is beating. There is a life force in us that we don't control. Now we control whether we exercise, how well we eat, but I don't need to think about my heart beating or breathing. And science is very good at explaining how your heart beats, the mechanism and the lungs and the breathing, but science can't tell us why we're here and what we're supposed to do here. And that's where I think religion and God come into it.
Thank you. Okay, James? Yes, next. Oh, I'll go there. To the top. Saya ngerjain yang bawa mic kayaknya. Yang ke sana ada? Di kanan atas, I think there's a woman.
See, I am inclusive.
Yes.
A first woman, okay. Where's he going?
There.
All the way there, all the way there. Selamat pagi.
Selamat pagi. There are a lot of good takeaways I can take from reading your book, but I would like to know from the perspective of the author himself. If you could tell us one advice to actually enjoy our life despite of all of its uncertainty and misery, what would it be?
See?
Your English is very clear, but the sound system isn't, so
what should be done to enjoy life? This quarter life crisis?
Is that a thing?
That's the thing now.
That's the thing now.
Yes, so they are nearly there. No, I'm kidding. Yes, she's asking about that. How do you have any advice on how to enjoy life to the fullest? Am I right?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think I would frame the question differently. I think as soon as you start to, and I realize it's a common thing to do, and I used to do it, as soon as you think in terms of how do I enjoy life, how can I be happier, which is really, I think, what you're asking, I think that's the wrong question, because happiness is sort of like the whirling dervish, the whirling that I attempted. The moment you become aware of it or make it your objective, you're going to fall on your face. So this philosopher, John Stuart Mill, said that happiness should be approached sideways like a crab. And as I say in the Geography of Bliss, happiness is a byproduct of a life lived well. So I think if you so in other words, happiness is not something that we should try to obtain directly. We try to, if you were to ask yourself instead of how can I enjoy life, how can I lead a meaningful life and find meaning in life? and be useful. I think that's another way of framing it. I find that people really want to be useful. And I think it becomes clearer to you as you become older. When I was young and starting my career as a journalist, I went to some older journalists, experienced, and I said, you know, I want to be a foreign correspondent. I really want, can you help me? And they did help me. A lot of them helped me. And if you looked at it from a utilitarian point of view, you said, oh, they helped you, Eric, because then you can help them. But I had nothing to offer them. So I was thinking now, why did they help me when I was young? I think because they wanted to be useful.
Yeah.
And so I think the question is not how can I enjoy life, but how can I lead a meaningful life? How can I lead a useful life? And when you make that slight change in orientation, it opens up a whole new world of possibilities to you. And the beautiful irony, and it is beautiful, is that when you lead a meaningful, useful life, you will also enjoy it more. But your objective is not enjoyment.
Yeah, I can agree with you because I've met people who he sounds fussy. I mean, like, you know, restless and everything, but apparently he just wants to be meaningful to the others.
Yes, and to be useful.
Yes.
To others. And, you know, it doesn't sound very fancy to say you want to be useful. It sounds like, well, don't you want more from life than usefulness? But usefulness is in using your skills that God gave you for good. For me, it's writing books and sharing them with the world. That's my usefulness. Unlike my father, I would have made a terrible doctor. I would have been a useless doctor because I don't like hospitals, I don't like blood. There are all kinds of reasons. So you have to find your particular vehicle for usefulness. And, you know, ideally you merge your particular skills that you have toward usefulness. And yeah, it can be very, very satisfying, you know. And some people being useful can also be just helping someone cross the streets in Jakarta, which is not easy, you know. You need useful people to do that. You can be the guys, we saw them driving here. Apparently, if you have a whistle in Bandung, you are a traffic police officer. No. And all you need to do is take your whistle on the street, and they were being useful for money, I guess. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, yes.
But, you know, that's useful. So usefulness can take many forms. You don't need to, you know, invent the iPhone like Steve Jobs. You maybe will write books like me. Maybe you'll become a nurse. You know, you can be a useful politician or a useless politician. Depends how you approach it.
True, true. There's a Sundanese word for that, kebutuhan untuk diwaro.
Which translates as...
the need to be recognized.
It's not a positive thing. Not positive?
Well, yeah.
Oh, kind of good?
Somewhere.
Need to be recognized.
Recognized, like
Okay.
waro is... Anyways. Okay, any other hands raised? We'll go that way now.
Women, well, we have a woman here, though. We have to be balanced.
Oh, okay.
Can
we have the movements there.
Can we go here first, in the orange jacket?
Mohon maaf ya, Mas. Kemana? The orange jacket, ya. Request sebentar ya, Mas. That one, Leonel. The lady in orange.
Lady in orange.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Okay, I want to ask, you travel around the world and you find a different religion. What do you think about the close-minded people who want to work apart these differences in religion?
The close-minded people.
Maksudnya kayak yang gimana ya, yang tidak menerima perbedaan dalam agama.
Who don't accept differences.
It's tricky. You know, I have friends who are very tolerant, except toward intolerant people. Or they'll say, I hate judgmental people. Judgmental people should be shot. Well,
And he's
that's a
being judgmental.
They're being judgmental. So you don't eliminate intolerance through more intolerance. And someone who taught us this. Many people have, but Mahatma Gandhi, who I'm a big fan of Gandhi, and you know, he said an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. And I don't know if he or others said, you know, don't curse the darkness, but turn on a light, which is a better approach. And so obviously, not obviously, but I think that tolerance is good. But like I said, I have many friends who are tolerant toward everyone except intolerant people. And we have a real polarization in my country, the United States. And part of the problem, I think, is that people, again, I'll quote Gandhi, he said, your goal is not to destroy your enemy, but to convert them. In fact, he said you should have opponents, but not enemies. And politically in my country, we have political enemies. We see them as people, you want to destroy your enemy, and that's the danger. Your opponent you want to win over. So I do think people should be tolerant of different ideas and thoughts, and I think they should work to convert the intolerant, not by telling them that they're terrible people because they're intolerant. So it's a more generous attitude toward the intolerant, actually, because protesting and protest has its place, but it should be nonviolent, and you should try to convert hearts and minds and not destroy enemies.
So a new version of make love, not war, convert, don't fight.
Convert, not convict, yeah, and have opponents but don't have enemies, because I think there's an important distinction.
Sure. Thank you. So the ladies, there are two ladies there. Would you like to take both?
Sure.
Not literally.
Yeah, but I am.
Silahkan mikrofonnya ke depan.
Which one would you take first?
You have the microphone. There you go.
Thank you. Well, hello, my name is Saifa.
Hello.
Yeah. My question starting with what if, since you mentioned earlier before that in seeking God, every question should start with what if, right?
Start with?
What if?
What if, yes.
Yeah. So, what if, in searching for happiness or bliss, what if people believes only in God, no longer believing in the religion? Because some people say that religion is the repeating rituals. What will happen?
The last part?
Sorry, can you repeat the last sentence? Some people say
It's that religion is the repeating rituals.
It's what?
Repeating rituals.
Repeating rituals.
Yeah.
So what will happen?
So not the institution,
Yeah.
just the God.
So it really depends on your motivation. We ideally, you know, there's that expression, not the finger pointing at the moon, but the moon itself. And religion is the finger pointing at the moon. And the goal, as much as there is a goal, is say the moon, to see the moon. The finger points to it. But we humans need rituals. I think during the pandemic we discovered that, and there is such a thing as secular rituals. For me, it's my morning coffee. You know, I have my coffee, I make it in a certain way with only a tiny amount of milk, always good Indonesian coffee. You do have great coffee. Less acid here than other parts of the world. Anyway, and then I meditate on the coffee, like I feel the warmth in my hands. And I actually make the coffee in the most time-consuming way, pouring, and I could use a machine, but I wouldn't enjoy it as much. But the point is, it is a ritual that helps me start my day. And rituals are a way of instilling good habits in us. And or or any ritual, well, good for you. But the rest of us, we need help. We need the ritual of our coffee in the morning before we can sit down and write, and we need some rituals of religion. And rituals in secular and religious life provide structure to our lives, and they help instill better habits and help us become better people. And ideally, you then get rid of the ritual. It's no longer the finger pointing to the moon, it's to the moon. But we're human, and we need them. So I think that's my answer. And the next question, please.
Okay, thank you. My name is Ali. Based from what you say earlier, you say that religion is a verb.
Verb.
Religion is a word. It makes you a better human. But if you see the conflict between men fighting to each other because of the religion, what will you say about that? And what should be done about that?
Who's fighting?
People fighting because of religious background.
I think the problem is when you think you have a monopoly on the truth. If you read, as I did, like all these religious texts, you realize there's what Aldous Huxley called the perennial philosophy, which is so many religions are saying the same thing. The golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You see similar things in Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam. So they're all saying the same thing, essentially, but saying it in different ways. And when you become obsessed with not the meaning but the words, and it must be said this way with this word, then you're missing the point. And so there's all religious fights, I think, are silly because all religions are saying the same thing using different words and in different languages. So, I think, and this is why religion gets a bad reputation, because people see it as a source of conflict in the world. Some say it is the greatest source of conflict. I don't know if that's true, and there have been non-religious cultures like Nazi Germany that have killed more people than any other regime. So religion can be a force for good or for bad, and fighting over the words when they're saying the same thing strikes me as silly.
Okay. Can I give it to that gentleman, because we did give him hope. Nggak mau PHP saya, Bu. Silakan.
Cek. Ya. Sir, let me introduce myself. My name Panji from Philosophy Faculty of Unpar.
Philosophy.
Yes.
So I want to ask to you, when you write the geography of faith, you find God in the other face. Would you like to tell to us what is your experience so that you interest that experience can make you write that the geography of faith? That's all.
I did not get that.
You said find God in other place. So can you tell a little bit of experience
About
why you write
traveling
geography of faith?
Is it about finding it in other places?
Yes.
Like traveling or?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, as I said earlier, I could have written the whole book without leaving my house, just reading books, going online. But I very much believe in the power of place, that where you are affects who you are. And I think when we travel, we give ourselves permission to be different people, to be better people. Maybe you've experienced this when you travel even to just a different region of Indonesia or a different country. You feel different. Maybe your senses are more heightened. You see things you wouldn't see otherwise. And you give yourself, you don't feel shackled and stuck to your old ways. That's why in so many religious traditions you see the pilgrimage. The journey to the desert, like Prophet Muhammad made. The road to Damascus that Paul made. The trip, the journey, the pilgrimage. Both religion and travel can be transformative. I say can be. There's no guarantee that if you go to church, you'll be transformed, or you go to a mosque, you'll be transformed. There's no guarantee that if you go to Disney World or Bali, that you'll be transformed by the experience. You have to be receptive to it. But I do believe, as I said before, that the whole purpose of travel, that your destination is never a place, but a new way of looking at things. And to me, that's why I love travel, why I still travel. Different food, yes, different customs, but really changing myself, a different way of looking at things. And I will go home from Indonesia with a slightly different way of looking at the world.
Okay, so I think that's the end of the question and answer.
Lots of questions.
There's
Good.
a relief there.
No, it's good questions.
We have Mizan has three gifts for the three, I don't want to say the best questions, but maybe the most intriguing or whatever category that
the
you
most
want.
useful, I don't know, the most intriguing, yes, okay.
So can you choose three? Should we announce it now? Yes.
Well, no, you're disqualified?
I didn't ask.
You asked lots of
I can ask for my own gifts later.
The question about rituals.
Yes.
What if they're all women? That will look bad. The question about Nietzsche and values.
Yeah.
What else? I'm forgetting it. What else was the question? I think there was another one, but I can't remember. Can you remind me what?
Then I'll be biased.
What?
Tolerance.
Yeah, tolerance, men and women.
Then we have how to be happy. What is God for you? What is religion?
About, how to enjoy life more. How to enjoy life.
How do we enjoy life? Yes. Okay, we are almost at the end of the program.
Can I say just a few words in Bahasa?
Sure.
Jangan lupa bahagia.
Jangan lupa.
Okay, repeat after me. 1, 2, 3. Jangan lupa bahagia.
Okay. So, I've read the book. I'm still along the way. I mean, like, I haven't finished. No, this one.
Okay,
the book.
but are you bahagia?
I am happy.
Okay.
To a certain standard. Okay. What I can see from the book is that it has layers. That's my testimony. I mean, I was going to protest you. Why did you go within America to find Sufi? And then on the next pages, you went to Turkey. So it's an interesting book. That's my testimony. Thank you very much for writing. And funny.
Yeah.
In a sarcastic way sometimes.
Sometimes. Keep reading. Okay.
Okay. So thank you very much, Eric, for the conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure everyone did too. And here comes the ceremonial again. Can I invite Bu Mutia, Pak Tribas, and Pastor Leo to come to the stage? We have gifts. We are in Asia, so we have gifts.
I understand. Thank you.
Could you come to the front? So first it's from Unpar to Mizan and Eric. Yeah. Silakan Pak Tribas. So this is a placard that you can put somewhere.
Testimony that you are here in Unpar.
I am here. Yeah. I am here. Thank you. And this is the symbol of the university?
Yeah, this is the symbol of the university, and this is Unpar. This is established in
1955. Wow. Terima kasih. Thank you.
Then from Pak Tribas, from Romo Leo to Ibu Mutia. as the
You are here
representative of
too.
Mizan.
Okay, yeah. You are Mizan.
Thank you. And then I think Mizan also have some gifts for us. Yes, silakan Ibu. Buat Unpar dulu. Diwakili oleh Pak Tribas.
Can I just say how much I love Mizan? That they my books are published in 25 different languages, 25 different countries. There are 3 countries outside the US where I am popular, I would say. Bulgaria, South Korea, and Indonesia. And it really, I always think why these countries, and part of it is Indonesians like my humor, or they like my sensibility, but a lot of it also is that Mizan, they put a lot of effort and love into the books. They come up with this box set. They work on the covers. They use great translators. They have a great staff like Yuliani who make it all possible. And terima kasih, Mizan.
Satu lagi buat Romo Leo. Silahkan. Silahkan difoto dulu. So we are taking pictures now.
Okay, pictures.
Di mana? Oh, saya juga. Oke.
Woman and the other side.
Oke.
Jangan lupa bahagia.
Jangan lupa bahagia. Oh, geser lagi. Digeser. Can we move to the left a little bit so it's balanced?
No, because they want to touch your face.
Oh.
Okay. I think we talk about taking a picture on that way.
Oh yes.
Are we doing it, Ira? Yes. Okay. The.
I'm familiar with it.
You know, Eric, your face looks.
Yang lain mau disuruh berdiri apa gimana, Ra?
Berdiri.
Rather large there.
Berdiri. Oke. Teman-teman boleh berdiri semua? Silahkan.
Yang foto siapa?
Nggak tahu.
Dari sini.
Ra?
See?
I am a Muslim. Wow.
Canggih.
Canggih banget. Di TB nggak ada.
Ini ada instruksinya nggak? Kita jangan lupa bahagia.
Jangan
Hitungan
lupa.
ketiga ya. 1, 2, 3.
Jangan lupa bahagia.
Oke. Sebentar. Fotonya belum.
Tadi apa?
Itu video. Oke.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Terima kasih. Baik, sekarang kita lanjutkan teman-teman. Silakan kalau ada yang mau beli bukunya dulu, silakan di luar. Erik akan ada di sini untuk menandatangani. Terima kasih atas kehadirannya. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semua.
Tes. Baik, Bapak Ibu dan rekan-rekan yang sudah memiliki buku dari Erik Weiner harap berkumpul di sisi sebelah sini untuk tanda tangan. Boleh lurus mengular Bapak Ibu? Dan dipastikan ketika bukunya sudah dibeli, tolong dibuka dulu plastiknya agar tidak lama di meja tanda tangan.
Okay, I better go. Thank you. I wrote something nice in there. You asked great questions. You're very comfortable and natural. Good job.
Oke, nanti akan ada teman dari LO yang akan bantu. Jadi untuk mempercepat boleh menitipkan handphonenya di teman LO.
Dunia terasa gelap saat kita berada di dalam ketidaktahuan. Hingga satu keingintahuan membuka pengetahuan. Dan satu pengetahuan itu membuka jutaan pengetahuan lainnya. Lalu kita akan silau.
Untuk rekan-rekan yang tadi menjadi penanya terbaik, kemanakah kalian?
Begitu dalamnya pemikiran.
Udah di depan ya?
Begitu beragamnya pandangan.
Ada
dan
tadi yang dinotis sebagai penanya
versi
terbaik.
Kebenaran. Tapi kita tidak perlu tersesat.
Hari ini menurut saya banyak terjadi polemik, konflik yang tidak perlu karena orang hanya lihat labelnya.
Temukan titik terang di segala hal.
The ethic of humility and openness. Kita ini harus rendah hati dan terbuka.
Di setiap aspek kehidupan.
Menjadi perempuan seharusnya perempuan itu saling mendukung, bukan saling menjatuhkan.
Dari berbagai pemikir.
Kita hanya bisa sedikit lebih baik daripada kemarin.
Dari berbagai penggagas ide yang berkurasi dari zaman ke zaman.
Bukan berarti budaya yang berbeda-beda dalam arti satu salah satu benar.
Kita harus terbuka kepada keragaman-keragaman bahasa manusia untuk menjelaskan pengalamannya ini.
To go from one idea to a new idea, you have to go through a transitional phase that's a little chaotic.
Ini semua adalah perjalanan yang menyempurnakan pemahaman dan mempertemukan dengan kebijaksanaan. Mizan, kurator pencerahan.